meeting of the Burlington Planning Commission for Tuesday, May 11th, 2021. Thank you for those who are here for being here. Megan, do we have anybody listening as well?
Yes, Sharon Busher's here. She's the only member of the public that we have right now. And she would like to speak when we get to public forum.
Great. Welcome, Sharon, and we'll get to you in just a few minutes. First item is the agenda. Any changes to the agenda? Okay, then we have our agenda. We have a chair's report, but I'm going to defer until right after David on the chair's report. So we're on the director's report.
Thank you, Andy. I'll defer most of what I might say to the agenda item related to the budget and the work plan. Two things I want to offer now, though, is to let the commission know that I've informed the mayor that it's not my intention to seek reappointment this year. I am looking to step down as the planning director after 12, 13, 15 years, after a while as planning director. And after a national search, probably sometime in the fall when a new director has been hired, I am expecting to transition into a part-time position, working for the city, kind of on more focused, detailed work around land use and development. So I'm not going anywhere. You'll still see me on occasion, but I think it's time for some new perspectives and new blood as a planning director, and look forward to maybe having a little bit more time with my now 2 grandsons and ski season and the like. So that's my news, and I'll talk a little bit more about what does that look like and what does that mean when it comes to the budget and the department's work plan. The only other thing I'll offer is in a public forum like this to congratulate Megan in being named this year's Vermont Professional Planner of the Year by the Vermont Planners Association. So she, unfortunately, we used to do a big to-do at the State House in announcing our award winners, and that hasn't happened. So we'll look for maybe something in the fall to celebrate the award winners, but much deserved recognition to Megan and all of her hard work, not just for us here in the city of Burlington, but she's the president of the Vermont Planners Association, has been for the last couple of years now, and really done some great work on behalf of planners and planning across the state and with influences across New England. So congratulations, Megan.
Congratulations, Megan.
Thank you. And thank
It's really great.
Thank you to Andy too. I think you contributed in some way to the nomination. So thank you very much for that.
Well,
That's great.
I hadn't heard that yet. So let me just start with David. That was the first news. Just David, thank you so much for your service. I know you're not going anywhere anytime soon, and it sounds like you'll be staying on, which is really good news. That's the better news of the 2 pieces of information that you gave us on yourself. But you've really helped shepherd us through some challenging issues, and I think we're in really good shape, and I think we've done a lot of really good work. I know, I've worked with you on different projects. There's been a lot of different things going on in the city. COVID certainly has been a big challenge, but that's barely anything of what you've done. I mean, that's just one small piece of the overall contributions that you've made. So you really, really, personally appreciate all the work that you've done on this one, with the city, with the, planning commission, with your office, just all the work you've done. So again, I know you're not going anywhere, or you're not going very far away. You're still going to be sticking around. And I appreciate that as well, because I think that's good. I think we'll be in better shape for that.
Thank you.
And Megan, I hadn't heard your news. So really, congratulations. That's awesome. I can't think of any professional planner who deserves it more in the state. You've just done incredible work with us, and incredible work for the city, incredible work for the state. I know it goes beyond, your work goes beyond the city in your statewide position, in your regional position that you have. So truly congratulations on that. That's awesome news. And Emily, you missed the two pieces of news. One is that Megan was given is it the Vermont Planner, a Professional Planner of the Year?
Professional planner of the year, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
And David let us know that as far as being director, he's planning on stepping down when a new director is put in, but will be staying in to continue doing work, but not in the director position.
Wow, okay. Well, geez, Dave. David, geez. That's
And I actually
sorry
think
to
that,
see you stepping down from that role. It's been great to work together. I mean, I guess we're still going to be working together. And Megan, I can say that I have been blown away by your skill at communication and dealing with challenging constituencies, to say the least. I have never seen someone manage that with such skillfulness like you have. You have a way of really bringing people together and helping create the space for really productive conversations and really diffuse negative energy in a meeting. You're so well equipped for your role. So I've been in awe of you in meetings for a long time. So well-deserved award. Congratulations.
Thank you, Emily.
all right. With that, we'll move on to our public forum, which is item 4. And Megan, you said that Sharon is here.
She is. Sharon, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Yes, I have. I was just waiting. I wanted the conversation to end. And congratulations, Megan, as everyone said, so well deserved. And David, I'm glad you're not stepping away, you're just stepping aside or down. And because I've really valued the conversations over the years that I've had with both you and Megan and Scott as a city councilor, and then continued on as a resident. Emily actually was, her words were so true, Megan, with your ability to engage with people on difficult topics. And David, your expertise is great. I look at you and I think form-based code. I'm not sure that's a positive for me, but I think of form-based code, and I think of your attempt at trying to make me understand it. I still think I need to get some kind of tutorial because I don't totally get it. But I think of that, and I think of all the other challenges that the Planning Commission, which is well served by several members that are stepping away, also have gone through over the past years. And we're so lucky to have a diverse and a diverse Planning Commission that can actually listen to each other and come to some conclusion to help our city move forward. So I feel very lucky to be part of this community, and knowing that all of you have been there and some will continue in some capacity. The only reason I wanted to speak tonight is that in your packet, there is a communication from me. And I just wanted to call attention to it. I know all of you can read it, but it really is something that I'm asking you to consider an amendment to your recently adopted shoreline property setback ordinance. And it was something that actually was not fully vetted because of where this resides. It's not all contiguous in the same sections, but suffice it to say, in a nutshell, it really, I think, points out an inconsistency. There's a section in the ordinance that talks about averaging of setbacks of existing structures. So it allows encroachment to the water's edge that really a table that sets the encroachment, saying it has to be 75 feet from the high water mark. But this averaging of setbacks, allows you to develop closer to than 75 feet. And what I'm asking all of you to do is to look at that exception and hopefully, and discuss it, and then hopefully decide that in today's world, in today's environment, that we really do want to protect even more stringently our water quality and our waterways, and would remove that exception and allow the table to stand with just having it be a firm 75 feet as opposed to allowing averaging. So that's what I'd like you to look at, and I'm hoping that you will consider it. I did send it to David and Megan and Scott to read, to hope that, I'm so wordy. Here I am already being too wordy, but was hoping that the communication was clear and more concise than I sometimes am. And so if you decide to take it up, I'd be more than happy to explain anything, but I know Scott and Megan and David can certainly do that far better than I. But thank you very much, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Sharon. Megan, Scott, is that something you could just take a look at and see if there's anything? Take a first cut at it, just give us a recommendation.
Sure. Yeah, we can bring this back to one of your upcoming meetings. We have talked a little bit about it as a staff, and think that, at first glance, the request that Sharon is making is reasonable. We do want to do a little bit of background research just to make sure that eliminating that exception wouldn't provide any kind of adverse impact on properties that are, especially really shallow properties along the lake shore, where that 75-foot encroachment into that 75-foot buffer might be the only way that they're able to accommodate development on their lot. So we just want to make sure that we look over that impact, and then when we do that, we can bring some kind of a recommendation forward to the commission.
Good, thank you, and thanks, Sharon, for bringing that up. Megan, is there anyone else?
Nope, we have no other members of the public on our meeting.
Okay, then we'll close the public forum and move on to item 5, which is proposed CDO amendment Article 14 updates. This is an item that we were talking about at our last meeting and sent it to Ordinance Committee just to give a more thorough review of it, because there were a lot of pieces in it.
Thank you. I'll start on this. The Ordinance Committee met last week, last Thursday, to discuss the amendments that were presented by staff, as well as the question, the request that was made by some property owners on Pine Street that the commission also sent to the Ordinance Committee to consider. I'll take that part up first. There were, I think it was 3 property owners on corner of Pine Street and King who have made a request that their property be rezoned to Form District 5, where it is currently, I think, high density residential today. Staff has discussed this, and it's our recommendation that this is a request that is really best considered in the context of some of the zoning boundaries as a rule, kind of as a whole, not relative to this particular zoning amendment. This area is going to be subject to some change relative to zoning when we start talking about the residential district around the form code. Do we create another form district for high density residential neighborhoods? What do we do to around the northern end of the enterprise district? How far does that come up when we rezone the enterprise zone? Those are all the kind of conversations that we ought to be having when we consider rezoning properties on Pine Street. So we don't think that it's the right time to be having that particular conversation relative to this amendment.
Before you go on, let me just check with anybody. Does anybody have a question on that item, on the rezoning of that parcel, those couple parcels? Okay, thanks.
And as to the larger amendment itself, there were two changes specifically that the committee discussed and approved sending back to the commission. The first has to do with materials. We have both primary and accent materials as part of the form code. And there was a specific inquiry made by Emily about different kinds of it's what is referred to, and I learned in the meeting, board formed cast in place concrete. There's some good examples of this in City Hall Park, where we in the current code, we only allow for a precast masonry, and it's limited to only trim and cornice elements. We discussed changing that particular line to allow for precast and cast in place, board formed, finished and or textured and patterned masonry, and without the limitation to just trim. So it could be part of a facade or an elevation where those kinds of materials can be used. I mean, if you'd like, I'm happy to share my screen and show you exactly where those are. Do you want me to do that?
Would you do that, David? Just because I don't think that the commissioners have this in front of them.
Yep, happy to. So here at line 142, 143, and this is the section related to building materials in the urban design standard. We're changing the language as noted here. So adding and cast in place, board formed, finished and or textured and patterned masonry, and striking for trim and cornice elements only. So that was the first change. The second change is just below it here on the same page, where again, we were asked to think about in making kind of preferential statements for different alternative materials that might be considered by the administrative officer by request of an applicant, that we also look that we consider those with low embodied carbon. So the last line here was amended to add that, so it reads regionally available materials and those with low embodied carbon will be strongly preferred. And this is then part of a discretionary request to the administrative officer to consider alternate materials, both accent and primary materials, that are considered equivalent or better and have demonstrated successful high quality installations. We also removed local installations and replaced that within a similar climate, because while you may not see an installation of a particular material in somewhere in Vermont, you know, if they've been able to demonstrate it successfully in Minnesota, what's wrong with that? I mean, it's another cold climate where the conditions are going to be likely similar. So that is the change there. So those were the two changes that the committee discussed. And that's it. It brings it back to you. Emily, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I wanted to ask about the materials. It sounds like it's just in the language is just in alternative materials, meaning that the way I read that, it means that it's, if you're doing a different type of material than what is suggested as the main material, then this language exists. I thought we were going to add it to sort of all materials within form-based code. Am I understanding it?
That is the way it's written now.
Yeah, I would think that it belongs in primary materials. Shall be constructed one or more primary tested and proven high quality, durable, and natural products. I think that's where I would think this language belongs, because if you have it in alternative materials, it's only going to be for when somebody is trying to do something that I guess is not natural or what's the language?
Mhm.
So,
Right,
I
that's
don't
not,
disagree. I think it could go there, could
Yeah.
move to that and have the same effect.
yeah, that would be my preference, and if everybody else thinks that's okay.
Does anyone have a concern with that? Doing it the way Emily suggested?
So would it show up in both locations or,
That's what I would think.
okay. Yeah, it seems,
All right, thanks for that, Emily.
I have a question.
Alex?
It's not about that. It's about something else. It's about the roof materials being selected to minimize solar reflectance. And maybe this isn't the time to bring it up, but I'm just wondering why. What's the purpose of minimizing solar reflectance?
It's a great question. I think it actually should be the opposite.
So, I mean, if roofs are blinding people or, reflecting, like an oven into a neighboring building, that could be a problem. But, generally,
It has
light
more
surfaces
to do with-
reflect solar heat back into space, dark ones absorb it.
Right, it has more to do with reducing the heat island effect. So the absorption of that heat energy, I'd rather see it reflected.
Thanks, David.
Anyone
I have a
else?
question. Yeah, what is embodied carbon? What's the definition of that?
So I think it was Matt Bushy that suggested that specific term. It would suggest that, and again, there is not a hard and fast standard here, one that's easily measured, but if you begin to consider the embodied carbon, I think you consider kind of the net impact from not just the material, but also its transport and processing and the like. It's a broader consideration of the carbon impacts of an individual material rather than just the material itself.
So like a life cycle type of analysis.
Correct.
Okay, anything else on either the elements David talked about or anything with this section? Any additional report from the ordinance committee? Any motions then?
Motion to accept the changes that we spoke about, including moving the materials language to the main materials section. And to, I guess, warn this for public hearing with the associated reports.
And approving the associated municipal bylaw amendment report, I think is what I heard you say.
That's what I said.
I thought so. So there's a motion by Emily and a second by Alex. Any more discussion? Great. Well, thanks to the ordinance committee for working on this, and David for your work on this as well. So we have a motion. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand or say aye.
I,
Any opposed? Great. So that will be warned for public hearing. Thank you. Item 6 is city planning FY22 proposed work plan and budget.
Great, thank you. This is another one for me as well. And see if I'm assuming everyone can see my screen.
Yes.
Very pleasing blue.
Oh, good. So I wanted to take a few minutes to give the commission an overview of what we have proposed for our budget, the Office of City Planning for the coming year. It has been kind of a fast and furious process for the budget because we really needed to wait until the election had passed before we really get serious about what are we going to be able to do and how are we going to be able to do it. And of course, the conversation has also and other tracks being influenced by ARPA funding and how the city is going to use its allocation. So I think the administration is kind of having a budget conversation with the city council on a couple of different tracks. So there's a lot going on right now. I think that it was last Monday night that the city council and board of finance got a kind of an overview presentation on the budget. So this is ours. And on the 19th, which is next Wednesday, we'll be making this presentation to the board of finance. So I won't, some of these things I'll go through pretty quickly because you know what we are, you know what we do. Hopefully you understand what our priorities are as a staff and kind of what we do and how we do it. The types of things that we do, the only thing I'll highlight here, in addition to the comprehensive planning, the ordinance development, the staff to the commission, the urban analytics design component is something that we have always done in part and in some ways in an ad hoc fashion. But as part of some reorganization of departments within the city, the Office of City Planning is going to be taking on 2 additional staff members and becoming home of the city's analytics function. So currently within the Department of Innovation and Technology, there are 2 staff positions that we will be taking into our house. They also come with their own workload, so it's not like we're gaining staff to do all these new and cool things. But I think over the course of the last year, we've really demonstrated the great synergies that we're able to create when we combine the professional planning staff with the analytics staff and put our heads together around critical issues confronting the city. That's kind of been the look of the city's analytics team. And we hope to kind of build upon those relationships and that work going forward. A lot of the work that they're focused on are largely internal, but then how they're externally manifested itself in terms of how the city kind of functions and how do we do things more efficiently and more effectively towards our broader common goals. And I think a lot of that work, again, can overflow into the work we do in the planning realm. So that's kind of a new function that you'll see as part of our department. We work very closely with lots of different departments around the city. These are certainly the primary ones we interface with on a regular basis. The mayor's office, Parks, CEDO, DPW, DPI, the attorney's office. And over the years, I think we've experienced a market increase in the demand for our time and our energies. As the mayor has told me, we're a victim of our own success. People really seek us out to be partners in their projects. They appreciate, they value our insights, our perspectives, our approaches, and we are regularly asked to participate in projects of other departments. What that really means is that it allows those departments to kind of expand their capacity and their expertise without adding additional staff. Of course, what that means for us is that we have more people asking us to help them with their projects, which takes away from our ability to focus on projects that we see as priorities for us to undertake. This is a very long list, but it's I think indicative of all of the kind of day-to-day work that our office is responsible for in responding to questions and challenges. A lot of the internal collaborations we have within the city and keeping track of a lot of external planning related projects and issues. You know, one good example is, did you know the University of Vermont is updating their master plan? Well, somebody needs to be kind of following that process, participating where possible, and our department is the logical folks to do that. This graphic is really kind of intended to represent the kinds of work that we do and where most of our time and energy goes. So in the blue is where we spend a bulk of our time and effort developing some of these minor amendments to the zoning ordinance that we work on in collaboration with permitting and inspections, kind of monitoring what's going on, neighboring communities across the region, across the state, like following legislation, supporting the work of you and the commission and your subcommittees, and just managing our office. Those are things that take a fair amount of our day-to-day effort. Then we're responding to all the questions that are coming from other departments and outside of the City Hall, and supporting those projects. At the end of the day, it leaves very little time for us to focus on what we see as being some of, our priority projects to be undertaken. Things that are kind of more than just a kind of a quick look at, does this zoning amendment make sense with regard to, a shoreline setback exemption or not. Really need to think more comprehensively and holistically about how does the ordinance work overall, what are the planning needs of a particular neighborhood, those types of things. As you all know, we do this work, or we have done this work now for the last couple of years with a staff of 2. It's just Megan and I. And we spend, of course, most of the past year working on COVID. So not done a whole lot of urban planning work. We do it where we can, and we've done as much as we can to try to keep the work of the commission moving, but that has come at the expense of being able to focus on some of these bigger picture topics and issues going forward. The gray boxes represent new positions. So outlined in blue are 2 positions that are coming from the Department of Innovation and Technology, 2 data analyst positions. The other 2, the Senior Urban Policy Advisor, that is the role that I'm looking to take once I'm no longer the director. It's a part-time position, 0.6, where I will be able to focus on some of these big picture issues, some of these more in the weeds, thinking about what are the key barriers to building housing in our zoning ordinance, or how to redefine the enterprise district, and what does that look like? Really getting into the weeds and some of those kinds of topics. The other position down here in gray, this associate planner position, is one that we've requested, but we don't have a commitment for yet. The mayor is still interested in hearing our arguments for why this is important. This is a position that we see as being really helpful to improving the efficiency of what we do, kind of reducing the opportunity cost of us spending a lot of time and energy preparing planning commission agendas and packets and getting them posted, Megan writing up the minutes, doing some of the data collection and basic research that then supports some of the larger projects that we take on. We would greatly benefit by having another full-time staff person in our office to help us do that kind of work. So that kind of work. These are our priorities for the coming year, and I think we may be hard pressed to follow through on all of these over the course of the year. Some are going to slip and slide. Some are going to jump to the front of the bus, depending on what's going on at any given time. But the first, of course, is facilitating a transition of leadership. As I said, I expect the mayor to do a national search to hire a new director of planning. That really won't get to the brass tacks decision-making part of the process until August or maybe September. So once we have somebody in place, then I will transition to a new position and be around to help facilitate that transition, to help maintain some of the continuity of work and knowledge for some period of time ahead. as well as welcoming them into an analytics position and beginning to weave in to what we do and how we do it, their workflow in managing that team, which will involve restarting BTV Stat, which is an internal kind of evaluative process where individual departments present 2 or 3 times a year on particular metrics that they're interested in measuring how do they improve their performance towards kind of broader community objectives. I think we mentioned before, the mayor is looking to do another housing summit this year. We're looking at sometime in later in the summer to bring up another suite of particular issues related to housing, and particularly housing equity. And so we'll be providing technical support to that process like we did last time. We hope to be able to restart economic development strategy. We've done some work around data collection and building a dashboard of economic metrics for the city, but really need to dive into developing what are our priorities and what is our best strategy going forward to ensure that the entire economy of the city is considered and strategically managed for making sure that we have kind of built-in resiliency, built-in equity, kind of across all different sectors of the economy, as well as all different workers within those sectors. I am currently working with an intern where we are doing an analysis of residential development patterns, looking at kind of size and configuration of lots, size and configurations of residential buildings, in order to build a data set that we can rely on when we begin having conversations about residential development and what is the proper kind of scale and pattern of development that we want to maintain in different parts of the city. What does that look like? What physical form does that take? In how we then focus more on maintaining that form and pattern rather than arbitrary numbers like dwelling units per acre. Rezoning the enterprise district, that was a key recommendation of the South End plan, taking the enterprise zone, dividing it into probably at least 3 different districts that focus on some different things. We hope to get funding from the Regional Planning Commission to update the impact fee study. We've requested funding for them to cover the transportation element of that study, and the city will then do the rest, but the project will actually get managed by the Regional Planning Commission. In response to the 2020 census, we anticipate needing to consider redistricting the 8 wards of the city, where they need to be proportional based on population. So we anticipate that our office will be responsible for some of the kind of tactical and analytical support to that conversation. Recreational cannabis rulemaking may have a great influence on us as a community, and ultimately then how we choose to regulate cannabis through our zoning ordinance. So that's something that we need to monitor closely and potentially prepare ordinance changes as that comes along. Sharing 2020 census data, I think this will be a really good fit for us, particularly within our analytics component. How do we do that most effectively? How do we build in kind of systems where this kind of information and other kind of information is shared across city departments and across our partners and across our community on a regular and ongoing basis? And the last 2 items are just part of our bread and butter day-to-day work of minor updates to the ordinance and support of the planning commission. So pretty long list, some really big topics in there, and some of which, as you can appreciate, sounds really simple, but at the end of the day can become complicated, drawn out public conversations. So it's very difficult to predict how long any of this any of this work will really take. But these are things that are all really important things to get done for a variety of different reasons. So once we get done with that stuff, we've got a few other things on the horizon. This is just a laundry list of things that we know is on our to-do list, but there's no way that we can consider undertaking these in the coming year. But we need to keep them on the list. And Andy, you'll note the new North End master plan is on that list. There is great interest amongst the new North End city councilors to undertake that kind of process. We're very interested and supportive of it. We need the time and the resources to be able to get to it, along with all of these other things. So when it comes to the budget, it's, again, we're a pretty small department, so some of this stuff is fairly straightforward. We don't generate any revenue anymore. That's Scott's job. So hopefully he's generating some revenue, and we'll get to siphon a little bit of that off to support our work. But we do hope to get about $40,000 from the Regional Planning Commission to help support the impact fee study. As far as expenses are concerned, our expectation is to be restoring our operating budget back to its pre-pandemic levels. So all of our operating expenses, including professional development and training, all of those come back to full capacity, plus additional funding to cover the new positions that we've requested. So there's actually an increase in our operating budget as a result of that. We've got about $200,000 in our request for professional consulting work, which we would not only include the impact fee study in that work, but also expect to use some of that money for the economic development strategy that I mentioned before. Transfer of 2 FTEs from Department of Innovation and Technology, and then the 2 planning positions that we requested, both the part-time position and the full-time position. As I mentioned, that the mayor's not committed to that full-time position yet. He's still listening, so I'm still talking. We'll still see where we go. I appreciate there's a lot of demands on the budget. We're making the best argument that we can going forward. And I think I've really touched on these points as to why these positions are critical, and how it really improves the efficiency and effective use of our existing expertise. We just can't do it all. We need some support, and we need more time and brain power in order to take on these many tasks. And that's it. That's kind of the overview of our budget and work plan for FY22.
Great. Thank you, David. That's quite a big list, as you said. Very, your plates are going to be full. So, certainly, from my perspective, I think expanding the department is something that we've talked about. So I'm not sure where the other commissioners are, but I know we've talked about it in the past, and assuming others are on board, if you need support from the commission on that, just let us know.
I would encourage you to reach out to anyone and everyone who will listen to you, say how important that is.
Great. Any comments or questions from others?
I would just second, it's really nice to see you thinking about expansion of staff. I was really concerned when in the reorg that it would be really difficult to maintain a robust staff for planning. So I'm really excited to see you putting this forward and making a case for these positions.
I agree that I don't think David, Megan, you could do it all, just the two of you, even if David tries to retire, go to 0.6. So absolutely support that.
Yeah, Alex, we don't use that word. Retire is not part of our vocabulary.
That's good. So you'll still be coming to the office?
Or working remotely.
No, that wasn't the question.
Yes.
Good. Anyone else? Well, great. Thank you for that presentation, David, and all that background and all that information. That was quite a lot. So we'll move on to our next item, which is item 7, update from Department of Permitting and Inspections. And I see Bill is here.
Good evening. It started out fresh off the golf course. Scott let me know the agenda item was coming up. I just got back from playing with the city employees golf league. It's our first night of the year. So thanks for timing this perfectly for me. So what I'm going to do is try to give you like a overview of what happened in the last year, and then turn things over to Scott to talk about the specifics of our zoning software, how our system that we just launched last week will be working. It was great to hear David talking a little bit about a budget, and I came in towards the tail end of his description, but I'm pretty sure you've probably seen that city budgets were a little challenged by the pandemic. We had a drop off significantly in activity, but our revenues were down by approximately 10 to 15%. They seem to be coming back online, and I think with a couple of good sized projects, we'll be back to where we needed to be. But our expenses were relatively stable and quite frugal with what we spent. So I think we're well above, our expenses are well above our revenues. I'm sorry, our revenues are well above our expenses. That's not even a question, but I did anticipate a much bigger cushion to maybe give David at the end of the year, but that'll end up being Catherine Shadd's decision. But nothing major in the way of the budget that went so far out of whack that we won't be getting it back in a relatively short period. I'll be doing my budget presentation next Thursday for the city council in their work session, and talking about where our anticipated year 2022 fiscal year budget will end up, but I think it'll be relatively stable compared to this year. You probably have already gotten a pretty good update from David, I'm assuming, on how the pandemic had impacted his department, but January 2020 was supposed to mark the relocation for the zoning team coming down from City Hall, and then the combination of the zoning division, trades division, housing division, all together in one place. And that worked for about 2 months until we had to reduce staff in March at the start of the pandemic. And as you probably know, it's been a really challenging year. We had a brief closure. We had, at the start of the pandemic, we had some positive staff results at 645 Pine Street. So we had a short closure and then a reopening with 50% staffing level. We did the best that we could under those circumstances, but at the same time, we were trying to bring that team together. We sort of forced them to work apart to keep that 50% staffing level. Scott had a great plan for his zoning team so that we had half of the customer service. We had one person alternating days so that we had someone to work on customer service, and the planning team rotated on a 3-day basis in office and working remotely so that we could keep our numbers low and maintain social distancing. There were times on the permitting side where there was very little activity. And then once the governor allowed the non-emergency construction to resume, we saw a slow increase, but most of them were smaller projects. That's what impacted the budget so much. The smaller projects, as you know, don't have the same permit fees because the permit fees are based both on the zoning side and on the trade side on the cost of the construction. We saw a few larger projects like hotels remain silent without any construction activity, which would have meant previously permitted things on the zoning side would have had to come in for building permits, and that didn't happen. We hope that will return quite soon. On the specific permitting scene, my primary observation this past year was that there was a major workload shift from the customer back to city staff. And by this, I mean, there were customer problems that would normally have resulted in customers traveling back and forth between City Hall and 645 Pine Street, now have really shifted primarily to the department's customer service staff. It's not ideal, but it's preferable to me that the staff experience those challenges rather than the customer, but that didn't necessarily sit well at all times with the customer service staff. But I found it somewhat encouraging that they were sensing the same frustration that customers had in the past, and then doing that work to help the customer so the customer wasn't experiencing it. So it was both a positive sign, but also showed that, Scott and I still have a lot of work to go to get the system working as smoothly as we'd like it. So with all the permitting staff in one location, it did make some of the communication challenges that we'd created with the customers a little bit more evident to the specific teams. For example, we had problems with some of the zoning permit times being connected with the building permit, so that transition, once the zoning permit was ready to be released, we still had some communication challenges with the trades team on making sure that we sort of lined up the permits to be released at the same time. So Scott's worked on the team regularly to make sure that the customer service team is working with the planners and with the trades team to try to fix some of those things. And feel comfortable that the permit workflow got to be as good as it could be until we got prepped for this OpenGov system, which is a major change. Some of the problems were as simple as automated email messages that were actually misdirecting customers to big process issues like permit release dates. And then when we fixed that, we had customers coming in once we knew that both the building permit and the zoning permit were ready to release. So things are not perfect yet, but I do believe that they are much better. One of the things that's much better right now to me is that the customer service staff has customer satisfaction as a top priority, and they're feeling that frustration that I mentioned, and not the customer. But now, of course, I don't want the customers or the staff to feel frustration, but I do like that ownership that I see in the customer service staff. Unfortunately, we're still operating at a reduced customer service staffing level so that we maintain social distancing, but I think that things will continue to get better as we're communicating better and working more closely together physically. Once we get the staff back to closer to 100%, things should get a lot smoother, and we can fill in some of the gaps that Scott and I have found. I have to say another thing that I think is working really well right now is Scott Guston. I have to embarrass him right here and compliment Scott. He's really been one of the anchors in this turbulent transition period. I think he's done a remarkable job with his permitting and policy and personnel aspects of this transition. I'm really blessed to have him on the team, and I'm feeling really confident that we wouldn't have made the progress that we did without his outstanding skills and his attention to detail. So there you go, Scott, and I hope you're blushing.
Thanks, Bill.
Now, 2021 has brought the addition of the new permitting software that hopefully you've heard about called OpenGov. This is the next major phase of the permit reform after co-location of staff. We have the system that allows customers to apply for and track permit requests online. We had hoped for an earlier launch in 2021, but we had quite a few setbacks with the data flow between the historic permit migration and the current system. And we were working in a sort of an environment where we could test things and see what was working. We have thousands of old permits, as you know, that we, going back to 2000 and let's see, it was 2003 when we had our first online permitting. All those permit folders came over, and over the weeks that we were working on it and turned into months, we found a lot of problems with some of that data not working the way that we wanted. So, together we worked with the innovation and technology team to find a satisfied workflow and had that migration working so that we could have that virtual environment move over, and now a go live date of last Monday, May 3rd. We've already seen what I call a steady and a routine amount of permitting activity, but a noticeable reduction in the front lobby visits. So we still have some customers coming in, but the first week alone, as an example, there were 22% fewer customers in the lobby, coming into lobby, than the previous 5-week average. I thought it was pretty noteworthy because every day had a lower number than any of the previous weeks, single day visits. And that actually happened again today. Our number was down almost 50% from what it was on a daily basis. We only had 22 people come in, and we were averaging somewhere close to 40 on some days. So that seems to be a trend that's going to continue, with people being able to access this database online and apply for and print their own permits in most cases. Some of the most vocal supporters so far in these first, I'd say, week and a half have been the trades customers, things like plumbing or electrical permits. They come in for or apply for permits almost daily in some cases, and they now can get their application online, get approval online, pay online, and even print their own permits from home or from their office. The payment system is a cash, or I'm sorry, they can do a credit card or a check, and there's a convenience fee if they use for online payments. The payment goes on to these fees, these convenient fees actually go to the vendor and not to the city. Some customers actually chosen to do their online work and still come in and drop off a check or pay cash because they don't want to pay the $5.99 for the check convenience fee or the 2.99% credit card, the convenience fee. Again, that's a choice, but we really had to pick one of the vendors to be able to do that system. And that's one of the things that we still have to work on to see if there's a way to help customers so they don't have to pay that. I do think for someone who's traveling and doesn't need to come in, it's probably worth $5.99, but that's an individual customer decision. But one of the other big things that the staff doesn't have to make double entries because our old system didn't communicate. The new system communicates directly with our financial management software. So the double entries of old are, it's one of the things that the staff has been really happy about, because that was really frustrating to tell the permitting software that someone had paid the $100 fee, whatever, and then have to go into the accounting software and enter the same information. So that's definitely a bonus for everybody. And I think it will make it so that there will be fewer errors as well. So you've heard enough from me. I'm going to turn it over to Scott, and he can talk some of the specifics about what this new software does specific for helping a customer get a zoning permit.
Okay, thanks, Bill. So just picking up on something that Bill had mentioned before about the coordination between trades and zoning permits. In my experience in the year and a half of being DPI, the biggest, most consistent headache on the staff end has been keeping the paperwork physically together and trying to do combined permit review for applicants. Giant headache, mind-boggling, hands-on procedures every day to try and keep it coordinated. So now we have OpenGov, and that's the new system that streamlines a lot of that. And so, Megan, if it's all right, I'm hoping to do a quick screen share.
Are you able to, or do I need to change?
No, I can do it.
Okay, great.
Or I think I can. Let's find out. So this is the landing page for the new system, and you can get to it from the DPI website, the zoning division. It's still a work in progress. I wouldn't say it's 100%, but it's definitely functional. And so each one of these tabs here, so construction and zoning permits, you can apply for anything through this. So you click on that, and as the applicant, you enter, I'm not going to do this because I haven't signed in as an applicant, but basically this is the catch-all application form here. And it goes through a series of initial questions that figures out what permit you need. So you might need just zoning, you might need zoning, electrical, and a right-of-way permit. But based on answers to those questions, that's your single doorway into that whole process. So you apply for them all concurrently, and they get reviewed, and out the other end comes your permit. We also have some of these I call them short form applications. And these are some of the most common applications that we get. And they are what they sound like. They're shorter. It's a much shorter application. So if you're just doing Windows, it's just a few clicks of the button and you give us photos of the existing windows and spec sheets on the proposed windows. And we issue your building and zoning permit for it. So similar idea for decks and fences. So again, we have our catch-all and then we have the short forms. As I said, it's still a work in progress. It's entirely online now. So the paperwork pushing will be phased out. So you apply online, you upload your application materials electronically, you can pay with credit card. Bill said you have an option. You can pay by check or cash if you want to come to the office or snail mail it, and staff will enter that information. But it's all coordinated online now. And out the other end comes your zoning, building, trades, permits, etc. I will point out a couple things. I was just going to note that the search function up here, this is a little aside from permitting, but this is kind of like the property database search on the city's main page, but it's pretty nifty. So if you just enter in the address you're looking for, it'll give you a whole list too, which is really nice as compared to the older permit system we had. You had to have the address exactly right before it pulled something. And when you had an address range like 55, 57 North Shore, it was maddening because you just couldn't pull it. So you search for the address and it gives you a list of all the permit records that are either active, which means they're pending or haven't been closed, or complete, which means they're all done. So you can dig in a little bit further to see what's going on with any one of those. That's a pretty nifty function. I will say that on the city's website end, I updated maybe half of it to redirect folks towards the new process and the new permit system. I still have some more cleanup to do to funnel everyone here. I'll point out that if any of you are thinking about applying, and I'm sorry to see Bruce and Yves aren't in the meeting tonight, but right now, at least on the zoning end, you're better off as an owner applicant than applying on behalf of an owner. There's some requirements in the system that make that a little bit difficult if an architect is applying for an owner, and I've encountered that a couple times already in the first week. So I think we need to give some thought to a workaround there. But yeah, if we have an owner applicant right now, that's the best way to go. We can get you through the door if you're applying on behalf of an owner, but it's not ideal. Along those same lines, once the application is filed, commonly larger projects have a lot more than one person involved, and we or the applicant can add a number of folks to that permit record so they can access it, see it, they can add things to it, download things from it. So I think this has been a huge leap forward in getting towards actual combined permit review. Maybe somewhere down the line, we actually have a combined permit. I guess the jury's out on if that singular permit is really better than getting all of your permits done together in a permit package. But that's something possible in the future. But yeah, this is a huge step forward for combined permit review. I guess that's all I had to say about that. Questions? Bill and I are happy to answer them.
Good. Thank you, Scott. Thanks, Bill. Any questions, comments from anyone else? Harris?
Yeah, I just want to say what a huge leap forward this is. Thinking to, applying for permits even 10 or 15 years ago, it's like a whole new world. So this is great. I wish you all good luck. It's just so early in the process, but I hope it rolls out well. I just went on my property. I see I have 3 active permits, and I haven't applied for a permit for a year, so you'll be hearing from me about that.
If it's active, they just might need a CO.
Good.
Okay.
Emily,
I actually just used this. I'm refinancing my mortgage, and my title search showed that I had some open permits and needed COs for. So I emailed the office and was directed to the website and was able to just figure it out intuitively. I felt like it was pretty user friendly.
Awesome.
And it was fun. I put in the request for the zoning permits to be closed, and I, in some cases, uploaded a photograph. Like in one case, it was a fence. It was like installing a fence on the west side of my property. So I just took a picture of the west side of my property and uploaded it, and they went in, charged me the CO fee, and looked at the picture and closed out the permit. And that was great. So it was pretty user friendly, and you can see, you get emails saying like, this has happened, so and so has looked into it, and you can message the person who's reviewing it. And I found that people were very responsive. Like I got responses in about within the hour to any message that I had put in, which was great. And it's proving to be pretty user friendly. One piece of feedback I'd have that I think could use improvement is because I had a bunch of open permits, it was hard for me to follow what was actually being closed. So I get a notice that says, here's your CO, but the number on the CO doesn't correspond with what I see as a consumer as like the open permit number. So I don't know which CO goes with which open permit. So having a standardized like number, it's either the permit request number or what the permit number is that follows the task and is imprinted on every single piece of correspondence. Like the email in the subject line has the number that goes with the open permit, so that as a consumer I can follow it, because I don't understand how to figure out what corresponds with what. But overall, I'm sure that can be remedied. Overall, it's really user friendly and great, and I think it's going to bring a lot of efficiencies and hopefully some happy consumers. So great job! It's cool.
Awesome.
thanks.
That makes me think, Emily. So sure, for older zoning permits, so pre-July 2020, it's still the old way, meaning we mostly rely on the applicants to contact us. But you can apply for the CO for the older permits. You can apply for a certificate of compliance through this, and you can also submit zoning complaints, zoning or housing complaints. And as to the numbering, Emily, without getting too far into the weeds, that's because of the converted data, right? The numbering system in OpenGov doesn't match that in Amanda, the prior system, and there's no way to make them match. But that's only because the permits you're closing out were done in Amanda, whereas you're closing them out through OpenGov.
They do have cross-reference numbers that we can align on the staff side, but I have to be honest and say I'm not sure what it looks like. We'll work with our IT team, the innovation and technology folks, to pull up some of the customer side so that we can dig into that. That's a great point. Thank you. I think other folks who are not as adept at this are going to be a lot more confused by that. So we want to fix that going forward and have a clear explanation for folks. Thank you.
It might be helpful if, and I know it's tedious, but like if the staff lets you know when you put in a request and said that, this is for, open zoning permit 1, 2, 3, and staff sees it as ABC. If when you put it in, they let you know that 1, 2, 3 is ABC, so that you can follow it.
Yeah.
Good. Thanks. Anyone else? Well, it certainly does seem, Scott and Bill, a lot of progress has been made. The system you're coming up with does look like it. I'll have to try it. It looks like it's a lot easier, a lot more efficient. So thanks for all that hard work both of you.
I'm
Really,
gonna- I'll add one more thing real quickly if I can.
sure.
Sure, and that's just that I did get an update from our city team. They confirmed that they have over 350 logins that were created for the city account. There's only 20 of us in DPI, so that's a lot for 7 days of usage. So I'm really pleased with that, and I'm sure it's going to grow exponentially over days to come. But 350 in 7 days, really, really happy with that progress.
Good. Thank you again. So unless there are other questions, comments, which I don't see, we'll move on to the next item, which is items 8, commissioner items. Our upcoming meetings are May 25th and June 8th, although there's a possibility that the May 25th one might get canceled, depending on what the need is for the agenda then. So just keep your eyes open for that. I don't think we know yet. And for those that are applying or reapplying to be on the commission, the deadline is, I think it's this Friday, May 14th. Any other commissioner items? Emily?
I was hoping to ask Bill Ward a question since we have him here. Bill, what's happening with recycling toters? I know I've been hearing a lot from people being really upset that not everyone has recycling toters in the garbage, and I've gotten a lot of feedback about it. I know that we passed that ordinance a while back, which I thought phased in recycling toters, and I'm wondering, what's keeping people from getting them, and what can we do to help facilitate that?
So the main thing right now is that DPW has no supply.
Okay.
There was someone who lives up on Mansfield sent a message to the mayor's office a few weeks ago, and I sent him back a picture of the giant empty corner in the DPW warehouse where they normally store them. And I'd say I would love to, enforce against people that don't have them, and I wish I could tell you when they are, but it could be pandemic related, but I'm not sure why they have not. They've had this back order of the covered toters supposedly coming for weeks now, and it's still weeks away from delivery. But I could probably send a message back through Megan or David to give you an update, or just reach out directly. But
well, it's great to know, because I knew it wasn't you. Like there's, because I knew that, it just seems like there hasn't been, I've been getting so many complaints about it and so much feedback. Just that piece of information, I think could calm a lot of people who are very upset about it. So I'll be sure to give that information out to the people who've been contacting me and to the city councilors, so that so people can be more patient.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks, Emily. Anybody else on commissioner items? All right, then minutes and communications. Is there a motion to approve the minutes and accept the communication?
I would
There's a-
move that we accept the minutes and approve the communications.
Motion by Alex, thank you, and a second by Harris. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, raise your hand or say aye. Any opposed? We have our minutes and communication, and that leaves our last item, which is adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by Emily, seconded by Harris. All those in favor of adjournment, raise your hand. We stand adjourned. Thank you, everybody.